It's been over a month since Operation Epic Fury began, and the Iranian military has already taken heavy damage. The attacks continue and the damage is significant, but one thing is clear: the fight is not over yet. The government hasn't surrendered yet, and now a bigger question is slowly emerging. Where is all of this really headed? At this point, it seems like there are only two possible directions this could go. The United States could win big, or the situation could turn around and become a huge problem for them. There's no middle ground. It's either a win or a failure. And if you look closely, there are signs that the situation isn't that simple. Yes, the U.S. still has the upper hand in terms of the damage they can inflict, but problems are starting to emerge. For example, Iran has already shot down a U.S. fighter jet, an F-15E Strike Eagle, within its own airspace. That's a big deal. Even though the pilots were rescued within 48 hours, it's clear that the fight is no longer one-sided. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video. This means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. Donald Trump's reaction on April 5 was even more noticeable when he issued an angry message against Iran. This shows that there is impatience already, and it's possible that the results they were expecting aren't happening as quickly as they want. And this is where a bigger problem comes in. Until now, it's still unclear to many people, what do they really want to happen in this operation? What does victory look like? When can they say it's over? As time goes by, the situation becomes more complicated, especially when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. Instead of only Iran being affected, it's possible that other countries could also get involved because of the actions of the U.S. in this area. This means that while they're trying to control the situation, there's a possibility that the problem could become bigger than expected. And if it's not clear what they really want to achieve, every step that follows becomes even more dangerous. Up to now, Donald Trump's administration still hasn't clearly stated what winning really means. In Operation Epic Fury, there isn't even a simple list, no concrete explanation of what exactly they want to happen at the end of this operation. And this is where the big problem begins. Because if the direction isn't clear, the fight could drag on, and no matter how strong the air power of the United States is, it won't be enough to end it. On March 26, Times spoke with several U.S. senators and representatives, and some of them said it's hard to win. What do they want to achieve? Their point is simple. If the end goal isn't clear, you can't really say if you've already won. One of the most straightforward speakers was Chris Van Hollen. According to Chris Van Hollen, this is a war chosen by Trump. We are not winning. We're in even greater danger, so this needs to stop. He added that if we still need to ask what the objective is, it means there really is no clear plan, no clear end, and no clear basis for when we can say we've won. To be honest, for others, this alone is already a sign of possible defeat, because the longer the fight drags on, the greater the risk for the U.S., especially since it has no less than 19 military bases in the Middle East. These bases are supposed to project strength, but as the war drags on without a clear direction, they themselves become targets of drones, missiles, and groups allied with Iran in the Gulf region. If that happens, the U.S. could lose personnel and equipment even outside of Iran, and the whole area would become even more chaotic than before. The Trump administration has said a few things about what they want to happen, but it's still not clear. On February 28, he said that one goal is to destroy Iran's missiles and its production. There has been some progress here, but since Iran continues to launch missiles at countries in the Gulf, it's clear that this is not over yet. Even though Iran's missile launches have decreased by 80 to 90% since Operation Epic Fury began, that doesn't mean the situation is okay. For Gulf countries like Kuwait, the threat is still being felt. On April 5, their water and power plants were even hit, so even though missile attacks have decreased, it's still dangerous. Another possible goal of the United States is to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. But until now, this hasn't happened yet, because the enriched uranium needed for this is still in Iran. There's another possible goal: to destroy Iran's Air Force and Navy. In this area, You could say the US has achieved something, because from the very beginning, Iran's Air Force has barely been able to operate, and their Navy has already lost more than 100 vessels. But even so, it's still not enough to say that the fight is over. Even if the big ships are gone, there are still small boats and drones that Iran uses, especially in the Strait of Hormuz. And this is where the situation really becomes a big problem. Until now, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Even though it's been over a month since the attack, and even though Donald Trump keeps making threats, it still hasn't been opened. According to Masahiro No, you can't say you've won as long as the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. This means that if it doesn't get opened, the fight isn't over yet. And if the goal now is to open it, it's like they're just going back to where they started. Because it was already open before Operation Epic Fury even started, this has a huge impact on the whole world. Since the operation started, the prices of oil and gas have gone up, and they won't go down as long as the passage is closed. It could even go higher. According to Paul Krugman, it could reach $150. That's the price per barrel. And it's not unlikely that it could even reach $200. That means it's almost double compared to the current price, especially if you compare it to the time of COVID in 2022, where the price was already high because of supply problems. Since Operation Epic Fury began, the amount of oil passing through the Strait of Hormuz has dropped significantly. Before, about 20 million barrels passed through every day. Now it's down to just 4 million. And if you think about it, almost 70% of the ships that make it through there are owned by or connected to Iran. That means even though the flow has decreased, Iran still has an advantage in that part of the conflict. It's not just oil and gas that are affected. Even fertilizers, sulfur, methanol, aluminum, helium, iron, and other important materials used in industry also have to pass through this area. According to the World Economic Forum, if the flow is completely stopped, it could cause a major problem for the global economy. And if the closure of the Strait of Hormuz continues, it could possibly lead to a global economic crisis. Honestly, some people are saying that it's already starting. But the very first ones affected are the Gulf countries, other than Iran, because they rely on this passage for trade. And business isn't their only problem now. There's something even more serious. Because of what's happening, Iran is becoming more aggressive against these countries. Just like what happened in Kuwait on April 5, where their water and power facilities were hit. And that's not all. There have been many successive attacks, from U.S. military bases to energy facilities in different countries in the Gulf. There has been tension for a while, and Operation Epic Fury has made it worse. According to the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs, it's possible that these countries might work together to fight against Iran. But Iran's allies still have a big problem. It's not just Iran itself taking action. There are also groups acting on their behalf. There's Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia groups in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and other smaller groups throughout the Middle East. The problem with these groups is that they're hard to monitor and even harder to stop. Even if Iran's facilities are hit, these groups will still continue their activities. On March 28, several countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates issued a statement against these groups. But even with these statements, it doesn't mean they will stop. Because for now, the conflict continues. Continuous airstrikes are also not enough to stop the groups allied with Iran. They are not fighting in the usual way. They hide, wait for the attacks to end, then suddenly retaliate in different ways. This is really their style. It's a way of fighting that Iran has been preparing for a long time. And if you think about it, this is also the kind of enemy that has been causing problems for the United States for a long time, from the time of Vietnam up to Iraq and Afghanistan. Aside from the battle itself, the USA has another big problem. The cost is now a major concern. It's not just money that's being depleted, but also equipment and supplies. According to James Comer, he wants to know where the money is going and how much more will be needed. His questions are simple. Should the spending be increased? And how much will be needed next? We already have an idea of the answer. According to The Guardian, the cost of Operation Epic Fury reached $12.7 billion in just the first 60, and as of now, it has been running for 37 days. If the spending rate remains the same, although it's not certain, it's possible that the total amount spent by the U.S. in Iran has reached $78.3 billion. Because of this, the White House is now requesting an additional $200 billion in funding to continue the fight, according to the BBC on March 19th. In addition, according to Le Monde, they also want to increase the U.S. defense budget by 40%, reaching $1.5 trillion per year. Their plan to get the money? According to Donald Trump's administration, they will reduce or eliminate other government expenses and return some responsibilities to local governments. In other words, as the fight goes on, it's not just the enemy that's a problem, but also the expenses, which keep getting bigger. According to the plan, the United States is expected to save $73 billion for the military. But even so, that's still not enough compared to the $200 billion requested by the White House, especially if you include the planned 40% increase in the defense budget. On top of that, there's the supply problem. In just 16 days of Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. has already used up 11,294 munitions. This means that it's not just money that's running out, but also bullets and equipment are being depleted quickly. And here comes the big question. Maybe the U.S. is spending more than what it will get in return. What will happen next? This is the possible ending that won't be good for the U.S. operation. Epic Fury will end without a clear direction and without any clear results achieved. The Gulf region will remain chaotic. Iran will still control the Strait of Hormuz and can close it any time, while the U.S. will have spent a huge amount and lost equipment that will take years to replace. That's what could happen if the risky Hormuz plan doesn't work. But what if the U.S. gets results? What does victory look like? One of the positive outcomes being considered is if there's a change in leadership in Iran, one that would have better relations with the U.S. and treat its own citizens better. Several politicians have said this, including Ted Cruz, who said it would be significant if the current leader, who supposedly wants to harm the U.S., is gone. Tommy Tuberville said the same thing. For him, it would be better if control of the country went to the people of Iran instead of just one leader. From the very start of Operation Epic Fury, there have already been events that could give hope in this direction. Along with Operation Roaring Lion, there was immediate news that Ali Khamenei was killed while underground, along with other important people in the Iranian government. If this is true, and these events continue, this could be the start of a change in Iran's leadership. Donald Trump himself said on March 5 that he wanted to interfere in the selection of Iran's new leader. But this was not followed. Instead, Mojtaba Khamenei was immediately installed as the new supreme leader after his father died. This is a big blow to the change that the U.S. was hoping for. According to CNN, instead of a change in direction, it seems that one hardline leader was just replaced by another who could be even tougher. According to Mona Yakubian, the new leadership is tougher, less likely to give in, and closer to the IRGC. This means that even though the former leader is gone, there hasn't really been a change in who has control and how they act against the U.S. In other words, there was a change in leadership. But this isn't the kind of change the U.S. wants. However, one thing is clear. The U.S. and Israel have proven that they can target even the most important person in the Iranian government. This means they can use this capability to pressure the new leader. Or if they want, they can repeat this one after another until the current leadership of Iran is completely gone. But this will take time and will require extensive information and planning. There's another possible scenario. It's possible that the people of Iran themselves might act against their government, especially if the hardships and chaos caused by these events continue. According to Georgetown journalist, this is possible, especially since the transfer of power to Mojtaba Khamenei was not smooth. Inside Iran now, the people are divided. There are still those who support the government. but many also disagree. And remember, even before all of this started, there were already protests in early 2026. This means that there have long been problems and misunderstandings within the country. Now it's getting even worse. The enemy isn't just outside. There's also conflict within. On the other hand, there are people who hope that with Ali Khamenei gone, there will be major changes in Iran. But until now, there still hasn't been any clear change. For the US and for Donald Trump, the most ideal scenario is for the people of Iran themselves to take action to change the government. But while there are bombs and attacks, it's hard for this to happen. It's possible that in the future, the US will help the people in Iran so they can act effectively without needing to send a lot of soldiers. For now, the situation inside Iran is chaotic. So it seems like there's a chance for this to happen. But if the people's plan isn't organized, the IRGC can easily stop them. According to the Royal United Services Institute, there were already signs of an uprising, but it didn't materialize. However, it's still possible for it to happen in the future. If that happens, it could also help solve the problem in the Strait. Another thing the US can do is remove Iran's enriched uranium. This is the crucial material needed to make a nuclear weapon. If it's removed, the threat from Iran will be reduced. For Cynthia Loomis, the meaning of victory is simple. Iran should no longer be able to make a nuclear weapon, and they won't be able to use missiles and drones for this anymore. It's also possible that the real plan is to weaken Iran until they themselves stop making nuclear weapons. For now, it's still unclear what Mojtaba Khamenei will do about this, according to CNN. But there are statements that the direction of their nuclear program might change. And for many in Trump's administration, that's enough to say that something is happening and the operation is yielding results. It also can't be ignored that Iran possesses more than 440 kilograms or 970 pounds of uranium, enriched up to 60% for making nuclear weapons. For a weapon, it still needs to reach 90%. But the truth is, a large part of the process has already been completed. This means that if Iran wants to, it could only take a few weeks to complete it. That's why the United States wants to make sure this doesn't happen. They've wanted to prevent this for a long time. If we're talking about the best thing that could happen for the US, it would be if the current leadership in Iran falls and their plans for nuclear weapons are completely abandoned. If that happens, a lot of problems will disappear on their own, especially in the Strait of Hormuz and throughout the Gulf area. And if Iran's enriched uranium is also eliminated, they will no longer be a threat to neighboring countries. While all of this is happening, the U.S. is preparing a possible ground operation that could change the course of the situation and may possibly be related to Iran's nuclear materials. At this point, it's clear that this is not just a simple fight. It's not just about missiles, ships, or airstrikes. The issue goes much deeper. Because while most people are focused on who's winning on the battlefield, there's another silent but very important battle happening at the same time. The battle for perception, control of information, and how the whole world views every move of both sides. This is where another angle comes in, one that isn't immediately noticed but could determine how all of this will end. While the physical battle continues, there's what we call an information war that's not as obvious, but just as serious as the real fighting. In this battle, it's not bullets that are used, but news, social media, and messages that can change people's beliefs. For example, every attack, every explosion, and every movement at sea doesn't just happen in the real world. It also spreads online immediately. Within a few minutes, there's already a video, analysis, and different interpretations from various countries. And this is where the critical question arises. Who do people believe? If more countries believe that the U.S. is causing instability, their support for it may decrease. But if Iran is seen as the main cause of the conflict, the U.S. will have a stronger justification to continue its operations. This means that it's not just territory that's being contested, but also the trust of the world. Along with this, there's another layer that's quieter but more dangerous: cyber warfare. While jets are flying and missiles are being launched, there are also hackers acting at the same time. Their targets are power grids, communication systems, and financial networks. Imagine if an entire city loses power or if the banking system suddenly stops working. No bullets were used, but the impact is immediate and significant. And if this is done at the same time as an actual attack, it weakens the enemy even more, even if the effects aren't directly visible. In this way, the battle expands from land, sea, and even to the skies, as well as into the digital world, which you can't touch but can definitely feel the effects of. There's another angle that can't be ignored. It's the effect this has on ordinary people who have nothing to do with the decisions made by leaders. While strategy and geopolitics are being discussed, there are families losing their homes, businesses being forced to close, and children growing up in the midst of fear. In Iran, as the problem intensifies, the economy is having an even harder time. Prices of goods are rising, the value of money is dropping, and job opportunities are shrinking. On the other hand, even the U.S. is not immune to the effects. As operational costs rise, there are domestic programs that could be affected, such as healthcare, education, and public services. This means that even if the conflict is far away, people feel its impact in their daily lives. And this is where another possible outcome comes in: war fatigue. As the conflict drags on without a clear result, the public grows weary, not just in Iran, but also in the U.S. and in other countries. When it reaches the point where more people want the conflict to end rather than continue, the problem changes for the leaders. Because in the end, no matter how strong the military is, you can't continue a war if your own people no longer support it. And if that happens, either side may be forced to withdraw. Not because they lost the battle, but because the situation can no longer be sustained. There's another possible direction that's rarely discussed: the role of other major countries that aren't directly involved but have significant interests. While the U.S. and Iran are preoccupied with each other, there are countries quietly observing and waiting for an opportunity. If the U.S. weakens due to excessive spending and its resources being spread too thin, another country might take its place in other parts of the world. The same goes for Iran. If it gets even weaker, others could come in to control certain aspects of the area. In other words, this isn't just a fight between two countries. It's like a big game where every move has an effect on the bigger situation. And as you put all of this together, military pressure, economic strain, information war, cyber attacks, and public opinion, it becomes clearer that there's no simple way for this situation to end. A big win on the battlefield is not enough. It's not enough for missile numbers to go down, and a change in leadership is also not enough if the overall direction doesn't change. Because in the end, the real question is not just who will win, but if anyone will truly win at all. And as every move, every decision, and every step behind the scenes continues, it becomes clearer that this fight is not just about the present, but about what kind of world will be built after all of this. And there's something else that could happen that isn't immediately noticed: the effect this will have on future generations. As the conflict drags on, children who grow up in this situation become more accustomed to it. For them, fear, the noise of attacks, and uncertainty become normal. When it reaches this point, it's not just a current problem being faced, but a much longer cycle that's harder to break. And if this isn't stopped, the tension can continue even after the fighting ends. Because sometimes the effects of war don't end with the last gunshot, but linger with the people left behind.